So, adding JavaScript to a HTML page, there's a number of options here, so I'm going to run through them and leave you with what I think is best practice. So basically, I've got a fairly simple HTML document here. It's part of a lab JavaScript DOM array. So there's no JavaScript in there at the moment. I can copy the path of that and we could put it into a browser, and so JavaScript is client side, so I don't need to run this through a server. I can just run this locally. Right, so I'm just going to use this as a way to show you how JavaScript can be loaded numerous different ways. So I'm going to right click as well and inspect and use the console over here to get some feedback as to see what we've been doing. Also useful here is the network tab when we, particularly this JS script here, so we can see what scripts have been loaded, but we'll come to that in a second. Right, so first of all, technique number one is to load the JavaScript what's known as inline. Now this is old school, so I'll show you how to do it, but in most cases you won't want to do it this way. So this is the technique where you could, for example, have on the body here, we could say on load, which is what's known as a JavaScript event. It's an inline event, and we'd say is equal to, and then we could put some quotes, and we could say console.info hi, and that just goes in as a string. Okay, so I've got on load, which is a JavaScript event, and then I've got a console message, which is just sending a hi to the console. So let me save that. Go back and I'll refresh the page to make sure I've got the console open there, and that code responds. Okay, so that's what's known as inline JavaScript. Now the issue with that is I'm not really going to be able to write a huge amount of code in there. It's going to get a real mess. And it's also difficult to debug because I could have lots of these different events attached to different parts of the document, different parts of what we call the DOM, and that's going to get tricky to debug. So you will see that technique used, particularly in one case I'll come to later on, but generally I would avoid that technique unless you've got a really good excuse not to. Now the second technique is to use a script tag. So this is where we can use a script tag, and I'll start off, there's two options for this. We'll start off by putting it up here. So I put in a script tag in the head of the document. So the head of the HTML document is where metadata goes, information about the page, and what we're providing here is the JavaScript that this page is going to run, in the same way that you would have the style sheets that are associated with that page. So inside that script tag, I can then write my code. So let's just use exactly the same example. So there we've got a console of hi. Right, so let's go back, refresh the page, and you'll see that that works just as well. But I'm going to be able to write more code in there without any great difficulty. So hello again. So we could have lots of other JavaScript code in there, and that's all going to run absolutely fine. So see, that's immediately better than doing it in line. Now the third option would be not to put the code in there, but to create an external file. So I've got a little JS folder there, and I'll create myself a new file, and I'll call it myscript.js. So I'm using Visual Studio Code, so you see it nicely picks up a little JS icon. And then in here, I could write my JavaScript. So I'll just lift these two console messages. Now notice when I'm in the script tag here, a bit like a CSS file, I don't need to put the script tag around the outside because this is a JS file, so the browser knows that this is JavaScript. So what we do to load this in, again I can do this in the head, is I can put in script, and then I need to use the source attribute and then provide the relative path to where that resource is. So it's picked it up there for me. Close that off, and then it's done it automatically for me there in Visual Studio Code, but I do need that closing script tag. So it's a little bit weird, because you don't actually put anything inside of that. Now do watch this. I see lots of students do this. They put script and then they put the source inside of the tag itself, and that isn't going to work. See the difference there? You've got the script tag and then you've got the script tag. Visual Studio Code is telling me that's wrong because this is an attribute. Like href is an attribute, class is an attribute, the ID is an attribute. So therefore we need to type script. Little trick here in Visual Studio Code, you see it's giving me it there, is you do :src, hit tab, it automatically puts that in for you, and then we put in the relative path to the file. So that's going to go and load that JS file, assume I've got the correct path, and there it is there with the information in it. So let's give that a whirl and see that works again. Now, difference being, I can now go to network, and if I go to JS, I can see that file being loaded, and I can actually see the code that I put in it if I look at the response through the network there. So this is the recommended way of working, because you can attach this file like with a style sheet to other pages, so you don't have to duplicate code across multiple documents. So if you've got a little bit of functionality you want to be used elsewhere, stick it in an external file, then you can just load it in. So that's our third technique, adding an external JavaScript file. Now we get to the nuance bit, because when you're using the script tag, you can choose to put it in the head of the document, which is what I've done there, or you can put it before the closing body tag. Now what's the difference? So, and that's the case for either of these two with the script tag. So what's the difference? The difference is to do with the way that the JavaScript needs to understand the DOM. Now watch for other videos about the DOM, but the DOM is basically all of this HTML, and that's the core thing that JavaScript is interested in manipulating. So let's say we've got this h1 tag here, which has got an ID of my heading. So what I could do is I could say document, which is my DOM, get element by ID. I'll talk about these in another movie. I could say my heading, and then I could use the property of inner HTML to change that to hello changed. Right, so that should change the inner HTML property of this DOM element. So let's see if it does. So I'll go and I'll refresh. So I'm expecting that value to change. And you'll see it doesn't, and you'll see that I get an error message and it says cannot set property inner HTML of null. Now the issue is here, we've not respected the DOM, is the way that I like to term this, because we've asked our JavaScript to fire here, but the JavaScript has been asked to go and find my heading, it's an element of ID, my ID, and change its HTML value to that. Now, the problem is it's asked to do that before the browsers had a chance to get to that line and load that H1. So we've jumped the gun. So this is where you could use an inline event. So a common technique here is to put on load, and then you say, and the common convention is to have a function called init. So that when the body loads, it's going to call this init function. I then need to address what I've got in here and put all of this inside of a function called init. So put my curly brace down there. So I've now got a function called init for initialize, and it's got my simple lines of code in it. So that function isn't going to get called until the body has loaded, and then it will call the init function, and that will resolve this issue, and you'll see that that text has changed. Now, so that is kind of a bit hypocritical of me, because I was saying don't use these. Well, you don't have to, because what we can do is we can get rid of that, and we can get rid of the function init around that. So back to how it was. And then the crucial thing is that we take that script tag from there. So I'm going to cut it, Control X from there, so it's not in the head anymore. And I'm going to put it down here before the closing body tag. So crucially, that script tag is now going to get called once all of this core DOM, all this HTML, the document object model is loaded, and the convention is to add it before the closing body tag because there shouldn't be any interesting HTML occurring from that point onwards, so therefore it's a good place to get your JavaScript to run. So let's save that. Let's go back and refresh, and you'll see it works absolutely fine. It's loading it from the external file, and the external file has no need for that additional function, and there's no need for the inline, rather messy inline JavaScript on the body tag. Okay, so that's my recommended way of working. Use an external JavaScript file, you load it by the script tag with the source attribute, and you place it before the closing body tag of the HTML document. Okay, thank you.